and welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice with the Jamaicans for Justice team. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy Specialist.
All right, so we're going to get straight into the business at hand, Jade. And this week, we're going to be breaking down the Integrity Commission's annual report for 2023-24 financial year. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be clarifying as well some of the misunderstandings, let's call it that we have been seeing in the public space, some of which unfortunately would be by those in the public arena, thought shapers who led to some misunderstandings of their own, and I think it created further confusion, if you will. So we're going to be breaking down some of the areas of concern in that annual report.
Yes, certainly.
But before we get into the annual report, our usual week that was. Now, Jamaica Gleaner invited us to comment on an issue that I think we've seen certain videos on social media wherein individuals have been seemingly forced, let me use that language, to apologize when they're in police custody. And there are some concerns there. Firstly, let me say this. If an individual feel compelled to apologize for an act that they believe is harmful to whomever the victim is or to public order, they can voluntarily apologize.
Yes.
Any attorney worth their salt would tell you not to.
Yes, they would, especially if you're trying to avoid liability for something.
Yes. The courts may look at it and say, perhaps you've expressed remorse. It won't get you off the offense.
Oh, no.
But it could perhaps be used as a mitigating factor to reduce whatever sentence or fine that could have been imposed.
Yes.
But again, we urge citizens not to speak, not to utter anything once they are being arrested or in police custody. And the reason for this practice of being forced, being coerced, being a concern, you have a constitutional right not to self-incriminate. You have a constitutional right where if you're being arrested, the police ought to issue a caution to say, listen, you have that right not to speak, to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. And if you cannot afford one of your own, then the state will make available to you a duty counselor. That is what the Constitution and our justice system provides for. So I think, Jade, anytime we see any such a video that is a cause for concern, I think we have to remind citizens of these rights that they have established in our supreme law, which is the Constitution of Jamaica.
You know, I just want to support that statement by saying that citizens should also be aware that the decision to remain silent is not one that affects your perception of guilt or innocence going forward. And the law actually provides for that both in common law and in legislation. So it clearly says choosing to remain silent, as is your right in these situations, has no effect on whether or not you are considered more or less guilty as your case goes forward.
Yes.
Yes.
And for avoidance of doubt, the query that the Gleaner made of JFJ was made following a matter involving a taxi driver. And I made it very clear that we're not speaking to that specific incident because we have nothing to suggest that the gentleman was coerced to make that public apology. Mm-hmm. But we're saying that in instances where that may be the case, then the police would be in violation of the law and would have been violating also the rules of the JCF itself.
And keep in mind, even if you are ordered by your superior to carry out what is essentially an unlawful order, you will be held liable for that unlawful order should it come to light later on.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Yes.
For the week that was.
Sure.
Your trivia, Jade?
Yes, so we do have a trivia question for this week, and it is closely related to our topic today, actually. So the question is, who is the chairman of the Joint Select Committee that is currently reviewing the Integrity Commission Act. So if you know that response, you can send your answer to 876-239-7583, or you can respond in our live chat on YouTube. We'll be looking out for the correct answer. First correct answer wins.
All right, so the Integrity Commission's annual report. All right, let's get into that. So we are aware that the Integrity Commission Act came into force in October of 2017, and I use the word legislative force here because operationally nothing really started until 2018. But the general purpose of the Integrity Commission is to ensure that it promotes and enhances ethical standards among parliamentarians, public officials, and other individuals by consolidating laws related to the prevention of corruption. It also aims to ensure that there's proper oversight of government contracts. Remember now that it is also incorporating what was the Office of the Contractor General, prescribed license through these contracts, monitoring and investigation. Importantly also, under Section 36 of the Act, the Integrity Commission is expected to produce an annual report each year, the most recent of which was tabled in Parliament on July 9th of 2024, sparking some public controversy about what was illicit 6 to illicit 2 and media practitioners subtracting and so on. So that public controversy we saw unfolding in the public light.
Now, outside of those annual reports on its activities and performance, the Act also requires the Commission to produce special reports that are on particular matters, and also investigative reports that detail findings from specific inquiries carried out by the Commission.
Now, just for our listeners to be made aware, the Integrity Commission Act has been under review since March of 2022, with the last meeting of the committee, that's the Joint Select Committee specifically, taking place in November of 2023. At that last meeting, there were still sections of the Act which the committee had not yet reached consensus on to produce a final report. We're now in July 2024. The point here is that, notwithstanding the fact that you have the Integrity Commission Act, our major anti-corruption tool, being under review from 2022 in now 2024, we still do not have a final recommendation report coming from the Joint Select Committee. I think it's also important, before we start getting into the annual report, for the listeners to appreciate that the Integrity Commission is the designated authority for the Protected Disclosure Act, that is commonly referred to as the Whistleblower Law. And that Act, which is the Protected Disclosure Act of 2011,
Yes.
is also under review. And by the way, memory serves me correct, I don't think from that Act came into effect in 2011, it has gotten any amendments whatsoever. So that piece of legislation that is there to protect whistleblowers so we can know what the issues are, that is also under review, and we have not yet gotten an update from that particular Joint Select Committee either, to have a sense of the status of the review and what the recommendations are. All right?
Yeah.
So we were just setting some context for our listeners to understand before we started going into the annual report. And we're going to be reading some sections of the annual report so that people can really understand what the issues are. But before we go into some of the specifics of the annual report, I want the listeners to also appreciate that the Integrity Commission Act itself, if you go to, and I'm going to be making reference to some sections, Jade and I, so you can read for yourself and you can come to an informed perspective, conclusion on some of the things. So it's not JFJ says so, it's not the Integrity Commission says so. We must have an appreciation of what the law itself provides for. So if you go to Section 36 of the Integrity Commission Act, it actually indicates, I think subsection 2, that there must be an annual report that is made, that is tabled before the House, and it makes reference to the second schedule of the Act that will tell you what the annual report should look like, the outline of it. It should give you a summary of the investigation. It can't give you any detail as to the status of it unless those investigations have been concluded. I think that is important for us to recognize, because when I hear the calls, why didn't the Integrity Commission say this? I think we must have an understanding of what the law allows, what the Integrity Commission can speak to, and what they cannot. I think that's the first clarification I want the public to appreciate, that the law itself, the legislation itself outlines what that report must look like.
Yes.
Yeah?
Certainly.
So first clarification of the day, so that the public can appreciate some things. Now, the illicit enrichment conversation. I want to say I'm not sure how media practitioners came to the conclusion that they could take it upon themselves and offer subtraction to say that it's no longer illicit 6, it's now illicit 2. When I would want the public, again, if you read the annual report, it's only 272 pages, including front and back covers, right?
And then there's some tables in there as well, so it's really not that much.
Yes. And if you take the time to read the annual report, what you would recognize is that the tables, they have clear headings. And the clear headings would indicate that these referrals for illicit enrichment is during the financial year that the annual report is reporting on.
Yes.
Therefore, each annual report stands on its own. Now, what I would have expected the Integrity Commission to do, Jade, because this is a public interest matter, rather than the illicit enrichment perhaps being spoken to in the chairman's remarks, that's Justice Seymour Panton, I would have found it more fitting for a paragraph to be included, because of the public interest around this particular matter, to clarify, just in case there were any misunderstandings, which clearly there was, that this here is for this specific reporting year. However, the Integrity Commission cannot speak on the previous years unless these matters have been concluded. But even though I say that, if one takes the we're upon the break, so we have to take the break, and then we finish out this thought and explain to you what illicit enrichment really means.
Oh, every time I pay the rent, it feel like the money could have been better spent. I want something for my own. I want to turn the key in my own home. They make it so convenient when you contact the NHD. No matter your home ownership goal, you can get a loan easily. If owning a home is what you want to do, NHD is here for delivering more. Delivering more.
Caribbean Airlines Reggae Sumfest and Appleton Estate presents Jamaica Rum Festival Blitz.
On Thursday, July 18th, Catherine Hall Stadium, Montego Bay. Gates open at 1 p.m. Enjoy rum seminar, rum tastings, and Beanie Man performing as Moses Davis. Music by Walshy Fire of Major Lazo, Bloodline Franco, Rush One Road Marshall, and DJ Asha. Tickets are available at reggaesumfest.com.
Sponsored by Magnum, Ray and Nephew, Appleton Estate, Jamaica Tourist Board, HNL Rapid True Value.
Must be 18 years and older to drink. Drink responsibly.
Music a play and the people a rock. Everybody asks for the calico jack. Cups up, make a party. Rum punch, send it my way. What you know? Fruit punch mixed with the rum. Link on my friend, them know. Hey, sipping on a vibe, yeah, we happy. Calico jack and then we started. Music a play and the people a rock. Everybody asks for the calico jack. Cups up, make a party. Rum punch, send it my way.
Yes, welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. Jade and I were discussing the Integrity Commission's annual report. And I was making the point before we went to the break for the listeners to understand and appreciate that at the beginning of the report, early in the report, it outlines with the tables the status of the referrals that were made during the financial year. But if one takes the time to read that report, what you would recognize in it, for example, you have each director giving a summary of the work that they would have done during the reporting year, but also it would give you an idea of some of the things that would have been concluded in that particular reporting year and some of the things that would have carried over. So, for example, you have the Director of Information Complaints. When you read that particular section, then you would get a sense of how many protected disclosures were made, where they came from, were they made directly to the Integrity Commission, did they come from the ministries and departments, were they made anonymously, and so on. When you go to the Director of Investigations report, a similar snapshot is also provided of the work that they would have done during the reporting year. And for example, it started giving you some detailed information, status of, for example, the former House Speaker Marisa Dalrymple's Philibert's work, that investigative report that we read last year. It gave you updates on other investigations that were concluded during the reporting year as well, which would have begun previously. If you go to the Director of Corruption Prosecutions, the same thing. But Jay, the point here is that people must read with probity and read with understanding, because as thought shapers, we can't afford to get it wrong because we lend to unnecessary noise.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, fully. I think we do have a little graphic that kind of goes into what illicit enrichment itself is and the penalties for same. I think since we're talking about it, we should speak a little bit about that provision as well. And for our listeners who may not be aware or becoming aware right now, illicit enrichment is found under the Corruption Prevention Act, which was amended in the schedule of the Integrity Commission Act. But illicit enrichment is an offense found under that act, and it essentially speaks to a public servant who owns assets that are disproportionate to their lawful earnings and have failed to provide a satisfactory explanation as to how they came into possession of those assets. Now, if you are unable to provide that proper explanation, then you may incur penalties. Now, what penalties you incur will depend on where the matter is heard. So if it is heard in the parish court, then for a first offense, you can receive a fine of up to $2 million or a term of imprisonment of up to 2 years or less, or both fine and imprisonment. For a second offense, it's $3 million or 3 years or less, or both fine and imprisonment. And that's just the parish court. In the circuit court, we have a $15 million fine, and for a first offense, it could be 5 years imprisonment, and you can get both fine and imprisonment. And for a second offense, it could be 10 years imprisonment, and you can get both fine and imprisonment. The fine remains the same for second offense, however.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of listening to media practitioners across the different radio stations. And if you listen, one would think that there is never a definition for illicit enrichment. And I'm in complete amazement of that level of misinformation that would make the public think that illicit enrichment is this thing that people just come up with. There is no standardized definition or protocols around it. So, listeners, it is clearly outlined in the Corruption Prevention Act, Section 14, subsection 5. So you can read for yourself. So in other words, if it is that your lawful earning has you earning what? Say $1 million for the year. And in making your statutory declaration, your filings as a public official or parliamentarian, you have assets that far exceed that lawful earning that you have, and you cannot or fail to give an explanation for it, then you can be investigated for illicit enrichment.
Yes.
And this is not unique to Jamaica. You have other countries that speak to unexplained wealth, and we will focus on that in short order. But there are a couple of things that I want us to clarify. For avoidance of doubt, JFJ has never and will never be calling for people who are under investigation to be publicly named. We have never made that call. And I've seen again where journalists who I would suggest you take the time to know the positions of the different organizations and not to share information that is not so about what one particular organization may have said versus the other. JFJ we have never made that call. Because from our perspective, we believe that there ought to be a balance with transparency, accountability, public interest, but natural justice. What we have made a call for, if anyone who is under investigation, who knows themselves to be under investigation, and you would know, based on the framing of the law,
Yes, you would know.
you would know. If you know yourself to be under investigation and you sit on the oversight committee that has oversight for the operation of the Integrity Commission, or if you sit on the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Integrity Commission Act, we think it is inappropriate for you to continue sitting on those committees, making recommendations that could undermine possibly the powers of the Integrity Commission. It's just inappropriate.
Yes.
And I've heard the comments from others to say that it has not yet reached to a particular stage. Firstly, the Parliament is not a court of law. So the threshold would be different. We must understand and look at things from a governance perspective as well. That's what we mean by public interest and balancing it. People have pushed back and say, you know what, Ms. Jackson, JFJ, so if people step aside, wouldn't they invariably out themselves? That's a possibility. That's a possibility. I won't shy away from it and say it's not. It is. But again, I go back to what we're balancing here. Transparency, accountability, public interest, and natural justice.
You know, I certainly think that in the event that a person would step aside under the knowledge that they are being investigated, but maintain that at the end of this investigation, there will be no findings that show any guilt or they will not have fallen afoul of the law once this investigation is complete. Mm-hmm. I certainly think that in the first instance that you can, taking that responsibility and removing yourself from the position to have influence in this area helps you and your public perception in the event that it is found that you were not, in fact, guilty of this provision.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's the point. The governance must be maintained at all times. The other thing, and I want to read a section from the Justice Seymour Panton's remark, and I think that has also led to some unnecessary speculation that counters perhaps the good work that Integrity Commission is doing. And I read this particular section of Justice Panton's remarks, and it says this. The Commission, and he was speaking to illicit enrichment in this particular section.
Yes.
The Commission has no control over the complaints and allegation it receives. It must, however, investigate them and make a note of the fact of the receipt and the investigation in the annual report. That is what the legislation passed by Parliament requires. The challenge I'm having with that is that it led to unnecessary speculation that one can just call into the Integrity Commission, make mischief, and that is what is reported in the so-called illicit aid. Huh? I don't think such a statement should have been placed in Justice Panton's remarks without any qualifier, because it would counter how the Integrity Commission itself carries out its work and would suggest that frivolous investigations are taking place. So for clarity, I want a couple things to be done. And again, people can read the report. When you go to pages 30, 31, 42, and 56 of that annual report, it would give you an indication, and Jade, you can we can place the outline of the Director of Information and Complaints on the screen.
Yes.
The Director of Information and Complaints would receive complaints from the public. Yeah?
Correct.
And because that director would also be receiving things that perhaps would be under the whistleblower law as well, given they are the designated authority.
Yes,
that particular unit falls within the Director of Information and Complaints. However, if you look at the wording of the legislation, it would give you an idea that the Director of Information and Complaints would be sifting through those complaints firstly, getting a sense of whether or not there is a particular merit to that complaint, and then a referral is made to the Director of Investigation thereafter.
Right. And to be clear, what they're trying to ascertain is that what you have actually reported is an act of corruption.
Absolutely.
An actual act of corruption worthy of investigation.
But I take it a step further.
Yes.
If you read the annual report beyond the first 10 pages, what it outlines is that there were 17 meetings held with a particular oversight committee, which includes members of the commission, the commissioners. And they would look through the merit of each complaint to even make a recommendation for it to go to the Director of Investigation. That is in the annual report, but you must read beyond the first 10 pages. So I was a little bit startled, and I would suggest that, you know, we take greater levels of how to write, so that, you know, and I think the chairman unwittingly led to another set of public outcry that suggested that, guess what, mischievous complaints are being made. And I want the public, Jay, to understand that if you make a complaint that is frivolous, the Protected Disclosure Act itself, another piece of legislation, would deal with you.
Yes.
So, you know, I think we must read with understanding and know the work of the commission throughout the year to get a sense of whether or not these complaints were of any merit, so that there is not an understanding that people just call in and make complaints and you go and investigate them. We take the break and then I pick up.
On your mark, set, get ready to go. It's time for the True Juice 5K, the one-of-a-kind experience taking you through the beautiful True Juice orchards in Boardwalk, Sunday, July 21, 2024. Register now at truejuice.com. Entry fee only $2,500. Come run, walk, and have fun while raising funds for the Linset Hospital. Follow at True Juice on Instagram for more details.
Oh, every time I pay the rent, it feel like your money could have been better spent. More want something for my own. More want to turn the key in my own at home. They make it so convenient when you contact the NHD. No matter your home ownership goal, you can get a loan easily. If owning a home is what you want to do, NHD is here for you. Delivering more.
The highly anticipated event for innovators and business leaders is back. That's right. The Realign Business and Investment Conference is set for July 23, 2024 at the AC Hotel in Kingston. Tune in to Cliff Hughes Online on Nationwide 90 FM from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as we help them to highlight this year's theme, Removing the Barriers, bringing investors and entrepreneurs together. The conference will feature a lineup of prominent speakers, including Michael Lee Chin, Dr. Marlon Street Forrest, Mrs. Talia Lynn, Mr. Anton Edmund, and Mr. David Mullings. This broadcast is for innovators, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. In the world of business, those who listen best often seize opportunities. So, listen during Cliff Hughes Online on July 23 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Realign Business and Investment Conference will provide creative insights to drive your business's growth. Tune in to this and so much more only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Entrepreneurial Partners Limited.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. So the last thing, because I know Jade wants to clarify a comment made here in the chat. I want the public to understand that though complaints, and let me say this, complaints can come in from the public.
Yes.
However, if a public official makes their statutory declaration, they file it, and you're unable to justify your assets versus your income being proportionate, that is, then that can also lead to an investigation. And if you read the annual report, you will get a sense of what the Information and Complaints Director did, how they came about, whatever they reviewed, versus what the Director of Investigation did. And I don't want the public again to be listening in and to say people making frivolous complaint, because the point here is this. The Integrity Commission is also the designated authority of the whistleblower law. So in other words, you want to encourage more people to make complaints, not less. But if you make a complaint that is not in good faith, that is malicious, the law will deal with you. And I think they should prosecute you fully, because you can't try to sully people's reputation. However, people should be encouraged to blow the whistle when you see maladministration taking place. So I wouldn't want us to be running with this thing. And that's why I'm saying I didn't like how the chairman wrote that in his annual report, because I think it was counterproductive how it was framed.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Well, I just wanted to quickly clarify something. I saw a comment in the Nationwide Live YouTube chat. I'm not going to name the commenter just in case they prefer to keep their information private. But just to clarify, under Section 54, subsection 5 of the Integrity Commission Act, which speaks to what the Director of Investigation would do with their findings, it clearly states that where the Director of Investigation finds that whatever the complaint was that was made did not constitute an act of corruption worthy of their investigation, then that person who was under the investigation, the subject matter of investigation, should be publicly exonerated of culpability. That's specifically what the Act says the Commission is to do. And that is the only way that would not be done is if the person requests for the Commission to not do so in writing. So the default is for the Commission to say where an investigation has taken place and it did not rise to an act of corruption, that person is publicly exonerated from those accusations.
All right, but I think what we should demand is that it's a full-page ad. Because I can't imagine being a public official and you know, my name has been muddied because of this, and then I don't get a full-page ad, because certainly when print and radio are running your name for their front-page articles and stories, you know, I hope they give it, and if Integrity Commission has to pay for those as well, they must. Because, again, reputational harm is a real concern. The other thing, Jade, you know, misinformation on social media, deliberately, unwittingly, but I think it is happening. There was a comment made that Integrity Commission is to be blamed for what is abound in the public about the solicit 8-6 and so on, because they listed in their table public official versus parliamentarians. Again, I would encourage people to read. The Integrity Commission Act, which is written by lawmakers, not the Integrity Commissioners or their executive director, by lawmakers. If you read through different sections of that legislation, there are two categories of people that are mentioned in there. You have one of the sections, Jade, for clarity?
You know, I don't even have to go to a section. We can go to the preamble because
and
the preamble.
read for the listeners so they understand that this is not an integrity commission issue.
The preamble of the act says it's an act to promote and enhance standards of ethical conduct for parliamentarians, public officials, and other persons by consolidating law related to the prevention of corruption and the award and monitoring and investigation of government contracts, etc.
So the point here is that right throughout the act itself mentions parliamentarians, public officials. So the Integrity Commission is merely reporting how the act itself is structured. What are we talking about?
Yes.
I think we must be careful that when we are informing people, we're not putting blame where blame is not warranted. And I think I hear the frustration in the chairman's remarks, and I want to read a section where he says, where is it? Apparently I didn't outline that section. But the commissioner, the chairman rather, he says that it is, here it is. Given the state of the legislation, it is irritatingly unfair and unreasonable for persons, some of whom know better, to be requesting that the Commission speak on matters relating to statutory declarations or investigations. Because, in other words, they know better. Now, I hear people saying that the Commission should provide an update. They can't. I also hear, even from the Justice Minister and some of my own colleagues, that the Commission should use the section that deals with special report and give an update. And it's a couple of things that we should consider. Can you find subsection 36, subsection 3 for me, Jade?
Sure.
You have it there?
Yes,
Can you
I
read
do.
for me quickly?
The Commission may at any time submit a report relating to any particular matter which, in the opinion of the Commission, requires the special attention of the Parliament.
You know, if you read the Integrity Commission's annual report each year and their positions, one of the questions they asked, and I guessed rhetorically so, if I'm to be given an update, why is that to the attention of Parliament? They also asked the question, if the gag order, which is under section 53 subsection 3 and I think 56 subsection 1, if you put them together, if the purpose of the Commission not speaking to protect one's reputation, how can you ask the Commission then to speak under a special report? Wouldn't the same intention or objective apply? I don't understand. And respectfully, and Jade as the attorney can correct me here if I'm wrong in my own assertions, I don't think any section can be viewed independently from others. Because if you look, for example, at section 54 that outlines the Director of Investigation, the findings, everything in that section speaks to the conclusion of an investigation before it is turned over to the Commission, before it can be tabled to Parliament. So in other words, what you would be asking is that the Director of Investigation tables a report or submits a report to the Commission that is inconclusive.
Yes.
That is outlining the stage, the progress of an investigation, and then that is what you're saying should be tabled to Parliament. It cannot, because you have to also be looking at these different sections together. But the question I ask parliamentarians, if the Integrity Commission is wrong in its own interpretation of the law, why not clarify it? Because if since inception they have been making these proposals and seeking clarification and amendments, and you are of the view that this is what the special report can do, and others are not of that view, but importantly the others here would be the Integrity Commission are not of that view, why not simply amend it? Because you know better. It cannot. So one of the recommendations that JFJ has made is for the gag order to be repealed, follow the provisions in other Commonwealth jurisdiction. And Jade, I will give you an opportunity because you wrote this very, you see I printed it, you know.
Yes.
You wrote that proposal for us.
Yes.
For the gag order to be repealed and follows a particular criteria. And you can just summarize for the viewers and the listeners what that proposal is speaking to.
Well, so we looked at a couple of Commonwealth jurisdictions to see what their similar provisions would be. And we looked at the United Kingdom, we looked at New Zealand, we looked at Australia. Essentially, what we would propose is that there are certain circumstances. So there are specific reasons where the commission might need public cooperation in order to continue an investigation or to finalize an investigation. And in that sense, aspects of that investigation can be shared with the public. Now, there would be some consideration for when you would be sharing that information. It would have to be within the public interest. Reputational damage and harm to other individuals and their businesses who would be under the investigation would have to be considered. The level of detail required to ensure high accuracy of the reporting, the other information that is in the public arena already, and the investigations into relevant matters by other organizations. So all of those considerations would have to be taken into account before
So you
they're
consider
able.
people's reputation, you consider public interest, you consider whether speaking publicly will aid in the investigation.
Yes.
So in other words, nobody's saying repeal gag order. The Integrity Commission is
Can
there
say
every
whatever
day.
they
Just
want.
come into the media.
No.
Come, Mr. Cliff Hughes, let me just give you an update. Nobody's calling for that.
No.
What we're saying is that if it is in the public interest for them to speak on a particular matter, and the threshold here is very high, you know,
Yes, it is.
that we've listed. Yeah?
Absolutely.
The other thing, Jade, I hear there are some comments here in the YouTube chat about whether or not people are being made aware of whether or not they're under investigation. I think I use whether or not too much just now. But are you told that you're under investigation? The question or the answer to that question is yes.
Yes, you are.
Because remember now, you know, if you are being asked, and go back to the wording of what is illicit enrichment, if you say that you have these assets, the Integrity Commission would be saying to you that when I look at your lawful earnings, they're not matching up.
Yes.
Can you clarify how you came to have these assets?
Yes.
Yeah? But there's some gaps in the law. So NIA, JFJ, and JAMP, we've been calling for consistently for the unexplained wealth orders to be placed in our legislation because there's several gaps here.
Yeah.
If you read, for example, illicit enrichment, we're upon a break?
Yes. So we'll take the break, and when we come back, we'll talk a bit more about that.
Is there a small business person in your community making a big difference? Do they inspire you and others? How are they helping? Let the Supreme Ventures Foundation know who is your Supreme Community Hero. Nominate yours and we will select 5 community-based businesses to receive a grant to invest in their business and in the community, plus entrepreneurial training. So, who is your Supreme Community Hero? Visit sv-foundation.com to nominate your Supreme Community Hero now. Nominations close July 26.
Oh, every time I pay the rent, it feel like it money could have been better spent. I want something for my own. I want to turn the key in my own home. They make it so convenient when you contact the NHD. No matter your home ownership call, you can get a loan easily. If owning a home is what you want to do, NHD is here for you. Delivering more. Delivering more.
I stay locked to the Olympics because, of course, I'm Jamaican. What you mean? Me, I have to tune into the Olympics, man. Because I'm always busy, but what? I have to know when Sherika Jackson beat Shakari.
Brother, I have to have every notification for the Olympics. I want to hear every run.
Now Sharika Jackson coming
every jump.
Oh, that is absolutely huge of Wade Pinkham.
Every fling. Live.
So, take us then.
Nothing can miss me.
We're always on the move.
So while we're driving, run, Elaine, run.
Jogging. Yes. Run, Watson. Win again.
Watson is now a world champion.
Or even at work.
Quick. The race has started.
We can't miss a beat because we keep it locked
To the only station
For the Paris Olympics.
nationwide.
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 90 FM.
Nationwide 90.1, 90.3, 90.5, 90.7 and 90.9 and on YouTube at Nationwide 90 FM Live. Nationwide, the new revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. Before we went to the break, we were clarifying and providing an update on our position regarding the call for the unexplained wealth order. Now, the unexplained wealth order, if you look at it in other jurisdictions, United Kingdom and so on, what it is similarly speaking to is illicit enrichment. But there are a couple things. Whereas our act speaks to the disproportionate earning to your assets. Other jurisdiction mentions, for example, things like property,
Yes.
but importantly, gifts that you receive.
Yes.
So in other words, it's not, or not only gifts that you receive, but other, what's the word? Not tangible, the opposite of tangible. Non-tangible benefits that or things that you would have received. For example, there was one of the jurisdiction I was reading, one of the parliamentarians, their mortgages were paid off. No, this is not asset where you get a car or something like that. But what it would be looking at, what other areas that could have led to bribery to take place, for example. So the mortgage was paid off. That is a non-tangible benefit, one could argue. If you have a nice job lineup after a while, that is something else. So there are certain gaps with how our section 14 subsection 5 is written that needs to be strengthened. The other thing I want the listeners to really understand is that our illicit enrichment really speaks to criminal charges being laid. Whereas in other jurisdiction, it allows for civil matter to ensue, which is less of a threshold to be met. For example, you can't explain your wealth. You can't explain how your mortgage of $2 million were paid off in such a short time after this particular investigation took shape. Then the court could issue an order that compels, what's the word?
The seizure.
The seizure.
So
the
they
state to
seize the
recover.
property, yes.
Yeah? These are provisions that we've been calling for, the unexplained wealth order.
And we've seen unexplained wealth order put revenue back into some jurisdictions. Australia in particular has been able to gain a couple million off of carrying out unexplained wealth orders.
So the point here is that while it's okay to criticize the Integrity Commission, because we must hold them accountable, I want us to read the report and understand the gaps. So as we segue into another gap following the unexplained wealth order, the matter of gifting.
Yes.
So a recommendation, Jade, if you could quickly speak to that one.
Sure. So under sections 43 and 4 of the Integrity Commission Act, parliamentarians are allowed to receive gifts. However, under subsection 4, it states that if the gift is a personal gift received by the parliamentarian or public official from a relative, then they do not have to disclose that gift, or that gift is not one that would come into question when
the
it
law
is that we're looking
specifically
at.
say, you know what, if it's your family give you a gift, you don't have to tell us.
Right.
Can you imagine?
Yes, I can. But also we can see the gap there, because we can see where that process may be used consistently to subsume assets that would otherwise be of question.
Yeah.
So the recommendation that was made by JFJ when we made our submission in 2022 was to have that section repealed. And in the annual report, the IC also made a similar recommendation.
Thanks, Jade. And as we segue to another issue that they flagged, we also raised it to the Joint Select Committee from a different perspective, but it's important to note. Say, for example, you go to the Integrity Commission or they're asking you for information, specifically now the Director of Information and Complaints, and you tell them lie. You mislead them with whatever information. They said to you, parliamentarian or public official A, how did you come about this asset, and you tell lie? So in other words, if you were receiving bribery, if you had received something that you ought not to have received, and you are participating in an act of corruption and you tell a lie to prevent the investigation from possibly happening, then you can be fined up to 2 million Jamaican dollars or up to 2 years terms of imprisonment.
Yes.
JFJ is of the view that that is too low, because you cannot benefit from telling a lie that would prevent an investigation from happening. Because if the act of corruption can land you in prison for up to 10 years or $15 million fine being imposed, how can you tell a lie to prevent it from advancing to that stage, and the maximum is 2 years or $2 million? It's incongruent. But I don't stop there. The Integrity Commission, I didn't even pick this up, Jade. That it is only when you tell that false and misleading information to the Director of Information and Complaints. No such similar provision is there when you are asked for information from the Director of Investigation. So there is a gap in the law there. So the Integrity Commission is saying, let's match it up, because you have one too many loopholes in the Integrity Commission Act. Yet we have the Joint Select Committee meeting from 2022. Last met in November 2023. But you know what they're debating? Term limits.
Yes.
They're not talking term limits for Prime Minister, not talking term limits for any other public official. You're talking term limits for the Executive Director and the Commissioners, because I get a sense that some of these proposals are not being made from a principled basis. They seem to be targeting an individual, and that is dangerous. We can't make laws that way.
I have to agree.
You know, so there are some other things there. One of the last thing that jumped out at me, because I know we're upon time. We have a few minutes, but we're upon time. It's nearing to the end. We ask for the status of things. Why the Integrity Commission, they get $1.8 billion? What is happening? And they need to do more work. And we agree with you. It's an investment, and we should be making that call.
Yes.
But again, when you read the report, there are some things that jump out at me. And I invite you to go to pages 147 and 148 of that report. 147 and 148. And you read it for yourself. And the chairman summarized the challenges in his remarks. When you go to pages 147, it outlines that the Integrity Commission, they have been trying to get a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution for several years. To date, nothing. They've been trying to have the tax administration cooperate. To date, nothing. Yeah? So while we want to see the Integrity Commission work, because this is a lot of investment, we must ask ourselves, how do we hold the other state entities and the private financial institutions to account? Because the law is strong, you know. But if the agencies within the state itself are not cooperating, how can they then undermine the work of the Integrity Commission? And how can us as citizens say to them that corruption is far too high in this country? And I find it very concerning that an annual report outlines that for at least 4 successive years, they've been trying to get MOUs with these other state bodies, and they seem not to be complying. So I think those other state bodies that are named in this annual report owe it to us, the citizens, to the public, to say, you know what, I don't understand. These are the challenges. So when I say read the annual report, listeners, this is what I mean, because it's beyond the illicit 6, 8, or 2. This is us understanding that there are many other issues that we must hold our lawmakers accountable on, the Integrity Commission accountable. And for example, I can't understand why to date they have not gotten their electrical the system there to help the statutory declarations being filed in a more timely manner. Right? But there are several things I want us to contemplate on as we talk about that report.
All right. Thank you so much, Mikkel. I think that we were very informed today on several sections of the Integrity Commission Act, and some of those misconceptions have really been allayed over the course of the show today. But I do have a winner for our trivia question. I don't know if you remember that because that was so early in the show. But we did ask the question, who is the chairman of that committee that we referenced just now, who is reviewing the Integrity Commission Act. And the chairman is Ed Bartlett. And
Mr. Edmund Bartlett.
Yes. The Minister of Tourism.
Working Minister of Tourism. Always working, eh?
Yes.
We have to give that to him. And by the way, he's such a pleasant soul. I've never heard a negative comment during the Oversight Committee. He has always tried to ensure that his counterparts, his colleagues, are very similar in their utterances, and he cautions them when they go a little bit out of the way to make certain utterances and so on.
Quite reasonable.
And what I would have hoped, as you mentioned, Mr. Bartlett being the chair of the Oversight Committee, is that the committee met with greater frequency last year.
Yes, they did.
Because they were not meeting.
They were not meeting before, yes.
So that was good news, I believe.
Yes, that was great news. By the way, the winner was news commentator J.A., so we will reach out to you.
Or you can ask news commentator.
Oh, yes. Could you please WhatsApp 239-7583 so that we can send you your prize. News commentator J.A.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want us to again, you can hold JFG accountable. Our website is still under review, so our audited financial statements will be there. But let me say this before this show ends. We do not have positions based on any interest of any donor. So to the media practitioners who keep on making that comment, I want you to keep yourself abreast of how NGOs work. So we're not here supporting any interest groups. We speak from a place of principle, and we speak based on the mandate and mission of the organization, and not one person at JFJ is compromised to be doing otherwise. So let me say that publicly, and I would urge media practitioners to do better when you're making public utterances that would suggest anything to the contrary to what I just outlined.
Yes.
So my name is Mikkel Jackson.
And I'm Jade Williams. Thank you for joining us.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Jamaicans, by justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
JP said me is banana chips. 20% more chips in the banana left them brown. The time by JP said Mary's banana chips is
2:00.